Welcome to Point of View, show where we provide high-level analysis of music and movies and our impressions of such while under the influence of legal Canadian cannabis. My name is Brett. I'm here with my co-hosts Terrell and Phil. Guys, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm a little exhausted. I was doing the Elmo slide with my wife and daughter earlier. It's a hit track by a little known artist. You guys are familiar with Elmo?
Elmo.
He has such great hits as Elmo's song.
Isn't he coming up soon? Aren't we doing Elmo on the show?
I hope to God not, because I'm so Elmo'd out right now, guys. But no, I'm glad to be here. Glad we can finally be doing this. This is gonna be coming out a bit late, but whatever. It's our podcast. Got a problem with it? Start your own goddamn podcast.
Yeah, exactly. We don't work on your schedule. We work on our schedule. Yeah. So today we got a pretty good show. I think you'll find that I will get more excited as the episode goes on. But yes, we have a rockin' good time with Meshuggah song, Swedish band Meshuggah. We're going to be doing their song Bleed, which I'll leave it to you guys to fawn over that one. And then we're covering the 1991 serial killer thriller, Silence of the Lambs. And
Hells yeah, we are.
I'm pretty stoked for
Hello,
that.
Clarice.
It's a pretty great movie. So, yeah, but before that, I just want to say, if you're not yet following us on social media, you can find us at Instagram and Twitter at The Stoners POV. As well, you can go to thestonerspov.com, and all our stuff is there. We also have a Spotify playlist and a YouTube channel. So
Yes, we do.
make sure you're checking us out, because we are out there, folks. And engaged. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you'd like to hear. Let us know if you have any tips. Let us know if you want us to fire Phil, because we are all ears for everything.
It's okay. I got like 1.5 feet out the door already. So
At this point, we'll take any reason, to be honest with you.
same here, really.
Yeah.
But seriously, I hate you guys.
We hate you too.
So, marijuana is obviously very central to the show, and it being legal in Canada is still a big deal, even though it's been over a year now. I have been smoking for as long as I can remember now, the Dad Kush. That seems to be an endless supply, because one plant is going to be more than enough to last me till the subsequent year's harvest. So 4 plants is a lot, but the reason I brought up weed, and I wanted to talk about it this week, is because I found that the crop that we grew this year, it tends to get in my head a little bit. And I think that's just because we're in a pandemic, and I have like a bit of anxiety and stuff, and it tends to.
So are you saying your weed is really good?
Yes, but I'm actually going somewhere with this. So it usually does that, but this week it had an opposite effect. It actually made me feel really good, and it like calmed things down, and it did the opposite of what it had been doing, which reminded me of something that I saw from friend of the show, Joe Rogan, in one of he did a dissertation on an Eddie Bravo jiu-jitsu book. And when he was talking about weed, he talked about how the first couple times you do it, or if you only do it infrequently, it can make you paranoid, because that's like, your ego clashing with who you are when you're high, type of thing. And like the clash of the face that you kind of project to the public versus like who you are inside can make you paranoid and stuff. But he said, as you smoke and get used to it, or get used to certain kinds and stuff, like that tends to go away. Like the paranoia like subsides, and so the reason I'm bringing this up is because I have no doubt that there's going to be the odd person who's going to stumble across this show that may or may not have actually, smoked weed, or might have done it and, got super paranoid and sketched out. And I'm not trying to be a bad influence, but like I would suggest sticking with it like at least a couple more
give
times.
It another try. Give it another try.
Like
give
don't
it 10
give
more
up.
tries.
Don't give
But
up
no,
on.
Yeah,
give
you
up
definitely
on
do
it.
meet those people that are like, oh yeah, I smoked weed once, and like I had such a terrible time.
Yeah.
A friend of ours, but I won't say their name, but you know who you are if you're listening, and message me if you hear this. His wife was telling my wife and I, we had gone out for dinner one day, and she was telling us about how she accidentally ate like an edible didn't realize she'd eaten it, and was like tripping balls, stuck with her husband's parents all day. Her husband wasn't even there. And like she just had like such a bad trip, and it's like, yeah, I will never try weed again. And I'm like, you know what? If that's your one reference to go by, I get it. But like, it's not always that way. It also helps to know that you're getting like what you're consuming is going to give you a buzz as well.
Yeah, I used to totally be that guy. Like we used to smoke in our cars, like on the sides of fields in the middle of nowhere where we grew up, because that was the only place as teenagers that we could like go smoking. And I remember being always like the paranoid guy that like somehow police were gonna like pull us over. So I actually really empathize with people when they like get paranoid, because I know what that feeling's like. And I think at the time, you know, you're right. I had this idea in my head that I was doing something like really naughty, which I really wasn't. And I think now that I'm older, and you guys can attest this, getting high is the funnest thing. It's like the chilling. It's so fun. I can't like. I find if I have like a stressful day or whatever, it's like the opposite effect of like what people talk about, like where it makes them sleepy. It makes me feel like creative. It makes me feel like more empathetic towards other people. Puts me in a good mood. And so, yeah, like Brett was saying, don't give it up. You know what I mean? Try again. You'll eventually find out it's like kind of sliding into a hot tub.
Even like so there's that episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where Larry gets some for his dad's glaucoma, right? And his dad is like, well, you can't not smoke it with me. And so like after Larry smokes it, he's in the bathroom like looking in the mirror like, you're a bad person, you need to stop doing this. And I can totally relate. Like I've had those mirror conversations with myself before, and I think it's a matter of where your headspace is when you get high, but also exactly what we're saying here, like as you familiarize yourself with it and you start to recognize that, oh, this feeling, it's just me being baked, you know. I find that it's the opposite now I'll get high and I'll sit and be like, man, you know, you did some cool shit today. You know what I mean? Like, you're not as hard on yourself. It's really good as a parent, I think, because like society gives us this idea that like smoking pot makes you like a bad person or whatever, and like, you know, that's why you'd have a mirror conversation, Brent, or like why I'd sit in the back of the car thinking the police are gonna get us. Yeah, it's just you have this idea in your head that like somehow you're doing something like so wrong that you like begin questioning that like how great you feel, and I think that's totally unwarranted. And I think that, you know, you should be allowed to get a little high, just like you're allowed to drink some beers or eat cheeseburgers. You know what I mean? Like, you should be able to do stuff that makes you feel good. Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, you guys are saying both as a parent and again, like my daughter's just coming up on 11 months, and she's at the age where she's just a fucking handful all day, every day. Like you cannot leave her unsupervised because she is actively trying to kill herself all the time. And so it's like bedtime, and it's like, you know, one of us puts the kid to bed and comes down to the other one's like, you got that bowl ready? And then, it's bakey time, because you know, it can take the edge off, it can relax you, it eases your aches and pains, it eases migraines, as we were talking about before, and also, you know, you're going to be functional again. Like you're not going to ever lose control, be well within your functions within like a half hour, you know. Right. So it's
hey Phil, do you know what doesn't ease migraines or make you feel calm? Bleed by Meshuggah.
No, it does not.
Yeah, and what a segue.
That was a good segue, right?
Yeah. Speaking of segues, this song. So I'll start out with saying, and this should come as no surprise to you guys, not my favorite song in the world.
Me and Phil talked earlier about what kind of hatred you're gonna spew.
Yeah, actually, so I wanna start off before anything else by giving them their props. These guys are the definitive alpha males of the Chug-a-Lug. They are the Chug-a-Lug thugs.
The Chug champs.
The Chug champs. Yeah,
they invented
are they the Chug thugs.
They're the Chug thugs.
They invented the genting. Like, you know,
that's the thing.
If you start from like 2000s to 2010, metalcore and like hardcore and metal like was like really big, and during that time, Meshuggah was just chug-a-lugging away in Sweden, and they were huge. Yeah. And then the 2010s came, and all the metalcore bands, all the hardcore bands, they suddenly were genting and listening to Meshuggah.
Yeah.
And they were headbanging to Bleed for sure.
Well, and you can you can tell that, like, first off, this song is like about 7.5 minutes, so you can tell that there were definite chunks of this song that, like, all those bands from that time were like, hey, if we borrowed this part and kind of, like, you know, sprinkled our own little personal pixie dust on it, we could use it and make it a part of our style, and none would be the wiser.
Guys, the riffs from this song are so frequently, like, directly lifted by other bands, and part of me, like, I actually wanted to kind of, like, try to monetize this video on YouTube just to see how many different copyright claims we would get from different labels representing different bands that stole that fucking riff to begin with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you have 7 minutes of different variations of Chug-a-Lug, and another band is a band that wants to have a riff that has a Chug-a-Lug, it's pretty much already done.
I never thought about it that way, Brett, but you raise a good point there.
Yeah. So speaking of that, we're here. It immediately comes in with the chugs. And I was okay with it, man. Like, I do like metal. I do like rock and riffs. Like, I was really headbanging. To be honest, vocals came in, was not blown away by them, if I'm being completely honest. I was not loving that Euro kind of, like, I couldn't really put my finger on what it was. It wasn't jiving.
It's very Meshuggah-y. Like, it's really Meshuggah exists kind of like in their own world and their own genre. In my point of view, like, Phil knows this. I've been obsessed with this band, like, a long, long time ago. They're one of my all-time, like, favorite metal bands. And what I find so fascinating about this song and, like, the way it comes in is we have to talk about it. Like, the weird polymeter of the bass drum and the guitars and the bass to the 4/4 of the snare and the hi-hat. Yeah. Like, it gives this song, like, the record before this, like, Obzen, which is the record that Bleed is on, is a little different than their last record. Their last record, they were much, like, more slower and, like, punishing. And this record, they have more of the fast stuff. But this whole song, what I love about it, like, in the polymeter, is, like, even though it's super complex, the whole time you're, like, headbanging because it just, like, forces you to like, accept the grind.
Well, it's just a punishing marathon of a song, and it will break you and make you love it. Like, it's just like, by the end of it, you're just like, you go to sleep that night, you know, you're dreaming of the Chug-a-Lugs.
I want to talk about
this song, but
I for sure
actually, Brett, sorry, if I may, one thing, if I may, when I first heard this song years ago, and I think it was actually Terrell that showed it to me,
for sure.
But I thought the same thing of the vocals. I was like, they're kind of lackluster, you know?
Yeah. And then, like, one note.
You listen to it, and you're like, what the fuck else can you really do over that? Like, what can you do? You know, you're not gonna break out a melody over that shit.
Right. And, like, I did try to give it, like, the proper assessment that I would give any other song that we would do for this show. And what I noticed is, like, their key changes are definitely well thought out. Like, the way the song is thought out, like, you can tell these guys know what they're doing and they're good. I just didn't love the parts personally. Like, it's not
an easy song to like. Like, it's a very extreme metal song. Yeah. Like, it's not designed for something you, like, show your grandma. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the thing is, I think it's one of those songs that, as a musician, like I can tell Brett's a musician because, like, he can't dare disrespect the amount of effort that it put in.
For sure.
Like, if you talk about it, the drummer, according to his name's Thomas Hack, he also writes the lyrics too. It actually took him months to learn how to play this song, and he had to change, like, his whole way of, like, drumming because their last record was actually all programmed with a software that Brett and us use, Drum Kit from Hell. And he was one of the guys that helped design it, and, like, they used his samples to make their record before this Catch 33.
Right.
But it took him just as long to learn Bleed as the entire rest of the Obzen album. And
I think I read it took him 5 months to learn how to play his drum. Like, this song actually almost got cut from that album.
It wasn't meant to be on the album.
He was having such a hard time learning it, and it's their biggest track now. And like, this song is directly responsible for Gent. You know, like, it's the granddaddy of them all.
For sure. What I did like was around the 2-minute mark, it comes in with a bit more of a melodic part. You guys, knowing me, should have expected that too, that I would resonate stronger with a more melodic part.
Well, the thing is with Meshuggah, they like to throw in these like jazz fusion-y kind of guitar riffs, and there's like the part that comes in there's kind of like this breakdown part, and then there's like another breakdown.
Right. Well, it's a heavier version of the melodic part that they go into for a bit. And I'm like, oh, you guys, you were there. You had me for a second, and now you're back to chug-a-lugging around like the 3-minute mark. They go back to chug-a-lugging hard, and I'm like, okay, but I want some more of that sweet, sweet melody. Like you've shown me you can do it now, so I want to hear it.
You're talking about though, like I challenge you to try to play that. Like it's
I could.
Like it's a triplet, and he's going like and going down the neck. It's insane.
This song in general, like within the first like 30 seconds of this song, I'm like, okay, like I'm listening to this song and my wrist hurts. You know, like god damn the chug-a-lug. Like I was actually watching a video of it just earlier. It's this guy. It's the Key of Jeeves. It's this older guy. I guess he's a former composer, and he's listening to the song. And he's like, the what is it? The phrases or whatever. He's like they're hitting 30 seconds like throughout the whole song, like 30-second notes, just constantly. Like it's so just absolutely punishing.
So and it's such a low tuning. It's like a low E. No, that's a low E. So it's an 8-string. So it's like almost like playing like a bass guitar on the guitar. And that's one of the things that makes this song kind of so unique because they kind of like bounce between these like lower sub frequencies, and that's what makes it so heavy, right?
So when I was taking my notes after this part, I'm just like, I can't really get into this song, and then I have in my notes like around 3:40 because I had to check the timestamp.
The synths.
There's this nice great surprise, and some lead comes in, and the drums were already kind of cool, but then they start rocking out, and then they stop for this really melodic part that's kind of dark. And the song has me again at this point, and I actually make a note of that. I'm like, okay, you got me back. Like, good on you guys for doing whatever the hell you want and still managing to like rope me in a couple times. But then it comes in with a little bit of a solo part, which I thought was fine. I totally thought the solo was fine, but it wasn't blowing me away. Like with a band this talented, when I hear a solo, I want my face to melt, and I didn't get that from the solo. Like I was more into the stuff that was behind it, the rhythm and the instrumentals and stuff that were behind the solo than the actual solo itself. That was like from the 5-minute to 6-minute mark.
I think that's kind of what they're going for though, because like this song, like playing this song is as hard as any fucking solo you're gonna play.
Probably harder.
You know what I mean? Like probably harder because like it's like you're shredding balls for 7 minutes. Like it's just like it's crazy, but
it's an uncoverable song, really.
Yeah.
Like you're not gonna go to like a high school talent show, and even though these kids may like worship Meshuggah, like one of the things I love about certain bands, and I like try to look for this in all bands, is when they do something that is like really hard for like people to copy, like the way they create their sounds or like their synths. And Meshuggah is like the greatest example of that. Like so many people want to be them, but could never play their songs. Like, and this is like the ultimate example.
It's a hilarious contrast to last week when More Than a Feeling was the exact opposite. It's the easiest thing to play, and nobody wants to do it and be awesome. So it's
aside from vocals, I think the vocals are the one that are holding back the cover bands on that
you're
particular little ditty.
But isn't that the case with pretty much everything? Because sorry about your high school band, but your singer probably sucks.
Well, okay, as you know, as a metal vocalist, I will say like this song is not challenging to sing. It's fucking everything else. That's
right.
Stopping the cover bands on this one.
And actually, where I was at in the song here, I'm around the 6-minute mark. It's back into a chug-a-lug breakdown, which I say, they do this early and often. But this one actually kind of like had me vibing, but then the singing came in again. And I'll have in my notes here, with a better vocalist, I think those parts could have been great, or at least a lot better. But I felt like it was just bringing it down for me. I don't know. It sucked because I wanted to like that part, especially because I had already kind of mentioned that, it's like, going off on these chug-a-lugs and stuff. And I'm like, but this one, I don't know what they changed up, but I'm into it. And then the singing came in and I was like, I'm not into it anymore. I'm like, this sucks.
The same part. It's the same part that comes in after the second chorus. It's like the fast beat. I know what you're talking about. And I agree with you. I think the weakness of Meshuggah is that, like, there really isn't a good way to sing over this, like to convey kind of like intense anger and like emotion that I feel when I listen to their music. And I think that like that, and I agree with you. Like their singer is like very like one note. What's interesting about the way they recorded this, just to kind of give you an idea, this was their first record that they recorded in Sweden, like in Stockholm, like themselves, and they self-produced it. And the guitarist and the drummer, they like write everything, even the vocals and the lyrics. And they would actually get their singer to come in and just like record stuff, and then they would like cut and paste and then get him to come back in and do it again. And there's like a quote, I forgot the quote that I read from the singer. He was like, I didn't even know what I was doing some days. Like I was just coming in, screaming my head off, and then going home. And so like he didn't really listen or like jam with the band to like write these vocals. This is the way, I think the reason why he does it the way he does it, it's such a simple primal kind of thing, is that's the way the band actually wants him to sing over it.
Well, like I think like part of it, it's like the guy, like it's like, listen, I don't remember his name. It's probably some Swedish name I can't pronounce anyways, but it's like, you're a fun hang, you can scream, and you got the Meshuggah face thing going for you. Like if you look behind me, like that's the Meshuggah face. Not everyone can do that.
That's an Undertaker
certainly not
face.
As well as him.
That's an Undertaker face.
Fine. But it's also a Meshuggah face.
Fair enough. But yeah, then we get a really fast, heavy chug-a-lug part that finishes the song off. And I actually really, really enjoyed that. And I write down in my notes here that it was very smart of them to do like a really sweet ending. Because for me, after that disappointment that I just went through with like wishing the vocalist was better, and like it saved the song for me. Like they ended on a high note. And I think this goes back to what you were saying, Phil, where it's what makes it one of those songs that when it's over, you're like, man, that's still there, because they ended really well.
It's just such like a like it's just such a definite, like it's just a hard stop. And like, I've probably used this analogy with you guys before, when we were making music, but like there's just something about that ability to just turn it on full blast and then just shut it off like just as quickly, which is just amazing. And like that's just again, it's just like, how else are you going to end this song? Slayer already did the bomb going off at the end of Rain and Blood, so other than that, you can just stop.
Which you can actually check out on our Spotify, a previous episode where we covered Rain and Blood and the John Cusack film High Fidelity. So make sure you check out that and all previous episodes.
You know what's crazy about this song too? Like just a little factoid for you guys. When this record came out, there's actually like this like academic study done by this, I think, is a professor. His name's Jonathan Pieslack. You can look him up. And he wrote this thing, Recasting Metal, Rhythm and Meter in the Music of Meshuggah. And what he examines, he says, the following article examines rhythm and meter in music written by the Swedish metal band, Meshuggah. Formed in 1987 in Umeå, Sweden, Meshuggah, which is Yiddish for crazy or insane, had its musical beginnings in the styles of bands like Metallica, Slayer, Anthrax, and Sepultura. So tying back in what you guys are saying, in my opinion, Meshuggah is just like those bands, like Metallica, Slayer. And I know it's not your favorite thing in the world, Brett, but like the reality is like, jazz guys didn't like the blues guys. The blues guys didn't like the rock guys.
Right.
Metalcore guys like you don't like the Genton guys.
Yeah. I don't even like metalcore.
Anymore. But
anymore.
Basically what I'm saying is like, I think what I like about Meshuggah is like they're such an extreme metal band, but they really did pave a new path in metal. Sure. And that's hard to do, man. That's hard to do. And I think their music is scary. Like it's a legit terrifying shit. Like this song is
my daughter actually cried when I tried to play this song.
Yeah, children. My daughter hates Meshuggah. She automatically is like, "Oh, what is that?" Like,
I found it ironic that the song used to be called Aneurysm because there were times where I felt like it was going to give me one.
Because like the lyrics are like about like a pain in the head. And then it's like, then kind of like the lyrics of the song and stuff kind of come together a bit, or the vocals of the song kind of come together a little bit more. I find when you realize that, you're like, oh yeah, it's supposed to be like this hammering drone in your head. It's this like cerebral experience. Yeah. I don't know. Or I just listened to Bleed so many times that I'm like hypnotized and drawn into it. All hail Meshuggah.
Well, I think anyone who appreciates the art of music and appreciates musicianship has no choice but to appreciate this song and this band. They're clearly very talented, and no amount of personal preference can take that away. So with that said, unless you guys have more you wanna go off on with regards to this song, I'm ready to get to the rankings if you dig.
Let's go to the rankings.
All right, I guess I'll just go first. It surprised me. I thought I was going to hate every bit of it.
So did we.
And I didn't. I liked some of it. I was able to actually give it a proper listen, and some parts even had me hooked. So It's that said, it's still like very, very low on my list of favorite songs. So I'm gonna give it a middle of the road score. I'll give it a 4.9.
Okay. This one I struggled with ranking because like I want to give it a really high ranking because of how influential it's been to heavy music in general, which also is a genre that tends to stagnate and just beat a dead fucking horse. And so for Meshuggah to come along and kind of change the game, and also change up their sound too. I'm gonna give it like a 7.5. It's a great song. One of my theories on this, because this came out in like 2008, I'm pretty sure Meshuggah heard Lamb of God and we're like, let's do that, but like Meshuggah would, and that's where this song comes
Like a
from.
Swedish version of it.
Yeah, like the more I listen to it, I'm like, I hear Lamb of God in there. Like I hear like beating on death's door in there, or something along those lines. And then again, not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but the timing matches up. Yeah, it's a great song. It's got that sneaky Tool quality to it, but like if instead of sneaking up on you, just a bunch of Vikings fucking put a battle axe in your forehead, kind of like that. But yeah, great song, 7.5, hugely influential, just an absolute monster of a track. I would give it higher if there just weren't so many other songs that I would put on ahead of this one, but not to take away from it. It's a milestone in music, and especially heavy music.
Yeah. My review is my review. You either like Meshuggah or you don't. If you're a fan, then Bleed and the whole record Obzen is probably going to become like your favorite song, or sorry, their favorite song and favorite album in their repertoire. I think Meshuggah is amazing. It's like so thick and savage and just like technically proficient without being like so show-offy like other metal bands like try so hard to do. I love how discordant and evil it sounds. I love the angular riffs. I love headbanging to it. I love how it offends people. I totally like that. I like music that like challenges people's point of view. Like I always have. I like punk music. I like Nirvana. I like Meshuggah. And like I said, if you're a fan, this song is like always going to be a classic to you. It's always on their set list. I'm going to give it an 8.5. I think it's like a chef's kiss to gent, and it's like every band wishes they could have a song like this in their repertoire that now plays like modern metal.
Yeah.
Right. So you're hanging out with some buddies. This comes on Spotify. Are you leaving it for the whole song, or are you switching it off?
I mean, it depends. Like, if it's me and Phil would probably like smash a chair and like jump through like a window if it came on, because like it would pump us up. But
we'd take off our shirts and just like rub up against each other and stuff. Oh yeah,
yeah. Like it's an amazing song, but I think like it's an acquired taste. It's like olives. Some people like olives, some people don't. You know what I mean? Like some people like Meshuggah and some people don't. And if you don't like it, then don't eat olives. You know what I mean? Don't listen to Meshuggah. I don't care. I like it. You know what I mean? Like it's my point of view. You know,
exactly.
I'm not giving up olives.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not giving up Meshuggah. I listen to it so loud on the way home in my car, and I loved the reaction that it gave to people, because literally sometimes people hear a song like this, like some old grandma. Like my grandma grew up like listening to Elvis Presley. This shit terrify my grandma. Like, you know what I mean? Like it would blow her mind to hear this stuff. She would hate it. Right?
Yeah, I must say I've definitely never had to listen to a song for this podcast so much through headphones. Just because every time I put it on, either my daughter would cry, my wife would tell me to just please turn it off, or both.
Yeah.
And she gave it the old college try. She's just like, I just can't do it. I'm like, I get it. Yeah. Like it's not, for
it's not easy listening. It's
it's
not coming up on the elevator.
It's fucking Meshuggah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get it.
But I'm glad we went there, because like we've been traditionally either doing like bangers of songs that are like in the upper echelon, or we've been doing just garbage songs which we just shit on all day. So to have a very like your taste may vary type of tune like this is a nice change of pace, because there's gonna be there's gonna be some crazy metal kids that get on here and they're like, yeah, Meshuggah.
Yeah.
And then there's gonna be other people that in the first 5 seconds when we play our clip are like have already turned it off, and that's fine.
Yeah, it's a very polarizing song. You like you were saying, Trails. Yeah, you know exactly which side of the fence you sit on, pretty much within the opening seconds of
there's
song,
Meshuggah people, and then there's non-Meshuggah people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that's fine. That's what makes the world go around. Yeah. Is that like some people say tomato, some say tomato. Like, you like Meshuggah, I like Meshuggah.
If you
like,
say
you know
tomato,
I mean?
you're wrong.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Who the fuck says tomato?
Tomato
British
is
people.
wrong, guys.
British people.
Tomato.
They also say aubergine instead of zucchini.
Sorry, Connor, if you say tomato. I don't think you do, but if you do,
get it right.
It's wrong.
Get it right.
Yeah. And with that, that wraps up the song portion of the show. Once again, want to encourage you guys to check out our social medias at the Stoners POV on Instagram and Twitter. We try to be active, but it's a lot easier to be active when you're active. Yeah. So I think we're going to take a little brief recess. We will adjourn and return after the jump. Welcome back to the second half of Stoner's Point of View. For 25 episodes, folks, this is episode 25, we have been clamoring for anyone who wanted a advertising spot to get in touch with us, and I am thrilled to send this to our very illustrious co-host Phil to introduce what is our first official advertising co-promotion. So here we go.
Just a quick shout out, I guess, to Leafwire, leafwire.com. It's the LinkedIn of cannabis. I'm a member on the site. If you want to join, it's free to join up. It's not super, they don't harass you with emails constantly like LinkedIn does. If anybody here's a member, it's just impossible to turn off their freaking emails. Leafwire is not like this. It's all the business end of cannabis. There's no stigma there. You don't need to worry about that. 40,000 members strong so far, including yours truly here. But most of them are way more professional than I am. Most of them. But yeah, check it out if you're looking for a job, if you're already in the industry, if you're looking to network, it's the place to be. It's pretty rad. Check it out.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Phil. And thank you, Leafwire. We're happy to be working together. And we are going to get into our movie, which I am very excited for. It's the 1991 Jodie Foster, Anthony Hopkins flick, Silence of the Lambs. Won a ton of awards. Like, it cleaned up that year. And good for it, because it deserves it. And right out of the gate, when I started the movie, this was the first movie since Donnie Darko, episode 2. Go back and watch that episode, folks, or listen to that episode, because only the audio is available, unfortunately. But still, go on Spotify, listen to it. Anyways, this was the first movie since we did Donnie Darko where I started it and immediately thought, am I too high for this? And yeah, it starts, well, just because the music right off the hop, like you're thrust into just like an unsettling vibe. It's because
it's like Clarice like running at the FBI facility. What I love about the soundtrack is that it's very like minimal. Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of scenes where all you hear is like doors creaking and like her feet. Like when she's in the scene in the end, all you really hear is her like panting. Yeah, and I love that. I love the flow of this movie. Like right off the bat, like all I gotta say about this movie is this is the first time I ever watched it like full completely.
Right.
It's always been on like TV and stuff that. Yeah. I've heard from other like movie nerds that it's like a really amazing movie, like top 10 all time. And I never ever watched the whole thing. So to watch this whole film, if you haven't seen it, I'm urging you right now to go out there and watch it. It's one of those movies that it doesn't sacrifice like the story and the uncomfortable like moments. Right. For the audience. Like it's intense. Like it's a really crazy movie.
Just to add that, if you haven't seen this movie, I strongly suggest pausing this and watching it, because we are about to spoil the shit out of this movie. If you haven't seen
it's 2 hours well spent, Again, I bitch about, that sweet 90-minute mark. This movie is the pacing of it. It's 2 hours you won't even realize have gone by. And yeah, it's so good. Like Terrell, like you had mentioned, I've definitely seen the movie multiple times, but as inappropriate as it would have been, I had seen it as a little kid a bunch of times. Yeah.
Phil, have you seen Silence of the Lambs on weed.
Oh, actually, this might be the first time actually, because it's definitely my first time watching this movie as an adult, and holy shit, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's my first time high, but I definitely, when I was in film school, I did like an analysis of the movie, but I this was the first time doing like the stoner's POV treatment, so I was pretty stoked on it. We get the opening shot of Clarice training, as you mentioned, Terrell, and right off the bat, to me, what I noticed was this was good character development immediately because we see that she's eager and ambitious, and she's going the extra mile. She's doing training that she doesn't have to do clearly because she's doing it by herself, right? We know that
Mhm.
in like a FBI situation or like any kind of police training or whatever, they do it in groups. So if you're out there training by yourself, you're clearly putting in the extra work. So we see, okay, she's a strong, ambitious female lead, which is excellent because Jodie Foster not only is quite a beautiful woman, but she's also a great lead. So
Yeah. Do you know they wanted Michelle Pfeiffer for this?
Yeah, but she was repulsed by it. Same with Sean Connery was repulsed by it to play Hannibal Lecter. He just wouldn't do it. And like, to be honest with you,
can you
like,
guys imagine if this was Michelle Pfeiffer and Sean Connery?
It wouldn't be nearly as good.
Yeah, like and those and they're both very good actors. You know, like it's not like they're they're scrubs they're bringing in. But yeah, it's just like the casting in this just seems so perfect. And you would think that both the leads in the movie would be their first choice because like these are both career defining roles for both of them.
Right.
I think especially Anthony Hopkins, who wasn't really that big of a name until he did this movie.
At least in Western cinema.
Yes,
for sure. So we get a cop, another guy comes running up and tells her that Crawford wants to see her in his office. And what I noticed here too was that the movie's very well directed as well. Jonathan Demme was the director, and what I like my filmmaker brain turned on for a bit because I noticed as Clarice is making her way back to the office, like the placement of the extras, the camera work, the blocking and staging, like it was just all done very deliberately and very masterfully. Where if you're looking for it and you're like doing an analysis or a study of the movie, you can tell there was a lot of attention to detail. But also, if you were just a person turning the movie on and just watching it, that stuff you'd never notice, other than you'd be like, "Oh, this is sweet."
That's what makes this movie so great, though, is that they're like the economy of the filmmaking and the shots. There's no like fluff. There's no like fancy shots. There's no slowdowns. There's none of that bullshit. And that's what I love about this movie is because, you know, I never really watched it like all the way through, right? So right off the bat, like even when she's talking to Crawford, who becomes like a main character, you're like really drawn into this like story really quickly because it seems like you're like right there with Clarice, and like a lot of the shots in this movie are directly from Clarice's point of view.
Yes,
it's from her, and I love that because like it really makes you kind of like acknowledge that she's like kind of like the hero of the story, like she's the main character,
right?
And you get really sucked into this movie really quickly because of the way it's shot, I feel.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well,
getting back to her meeting with Crawford, though.
Yeah,
she shows up.
Yeah.
And it's like, you got to see Crawford, like, run over to his office. And he's not even there. Like, oh, he'll be there in a few minutes. Like, what a power move by Crawford.
Yeah, no kidding. And, like, while she's in his office, she notices a bunch of articles on the wall profiling this killer Buffalo Bill, which is like pretty blatant foreshadowing about what's to come, but like at the time we don't know that. And then we get introduced to Crawford, who I just want to touch on that actor for a sec, Scott Glenn. So he had a role in Training Day. You might remember him from that. He was in The Hunt for Red October and stuff. But the major role that I remember him for was in this HBO show called The Leftovers. And I just want to say, if you've never watched that, which I'm guessing a lot of people haven't because it's very obscure, go watch that show, man, because it's only 3 seasons. It's easily bingeable, easily digestible, and it's friggin' awesome. So, anyways,
it's really good, but really depressing.
Yes, super depressing, super depressing. Yeah. But yeah, then Crawford comes in, and they begin their kind of dialogue with each other. And I had my cool stoner moment here, where when Crawford's reading off all the awards and such that Clarice has won, I just remember like my stone brain going, man, that's a really cool way of basically making it clear that she's a badass, like without directly saying she's a badass. Because he's just like reading off all you had like straight A's in psychology and all this stuff, and I can't remember word for word, but yeah, she's just got a lot of good credentials to her name. Anyways, he tells her he wants her to visit and get a psychological profile of patient Hannibal Lecter. She immediately is like, "Oh, Hannibal the cannibal." And so we get the first and only reference to Hannibal the cannibal. So from her perspective, she's doing a psychological profile on Hannibal Lecter. And so she goes over to the asylum. The main psychiatrist there, Chilton, I think is his name, he meets Clarice and talks about how he's like Lecter's nemesis, or Lecter sees him as his nemesis. And I thought that was kind of cool because we, in what was it, Snatch, we had that whole speech on what a nemesis is and stuff.
Do you know what nemesis means?
I thought that was kind of cool.
Chilton is hella creepy though too. He's got his trying his little pickup game, and it's like, first off, like that's weak, and like you're also throwing up some seriously rapey vibes over here.
Oh man, and that's the thing about this film. It like one of the things that I found is like a guy. It like puts you in the position of Clarice, and like a lot of women, all the kind of like the bullshit they have to go through every day with like creepy, rapey dudes, and like. I was raised to never act like this, like especially towards like a beautiful, perfect lady like Clarice.
Yeah.
Like you
who
know what
clearly
I mean?
works her ass off and like could probably kick my ass.
Exactly. And like what's even worse is this Chilton guy, like he's so creepy throughout the whole film, and like he ends up getting his due. We kind of allude to at the end of the movie. Yeah. But a lot of this movie is about is like through one of the things I love about Clarice and what the movie's a lot about is like how she stands up through like adversity, especially delivered by like men against her, like whether it's the scene where like Crawford's like, oh, we shouldn't talk about this, there's a lady present, or like when Miggs does what he does to her, she always like puts on like a brave face, and this is like the first example we get of like how strong of a character she really is.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, but also another thing too to kind of add to that narrative of the movie, because it is there. But it's just put forward as a good story, and it's not like, oh, everyone look at how strong and empowered this woman is. It's just like, no, a woman can just be part of a good story. Yeah. And if it's good storytelling, like people will appreciate it. Well, like it's like the saying like the best job, or your job is done right when nobody realizes you've done anything at all. Yeah. Like I look at it kind of like that, where it's like it doesn't need to be flashed in your face, a la Wonder Woman or
like a lot of the modern movies.
It can just be a good film,
Well, yeah, I think what I love about this is like Clarice is like one of the few times that you get to see a female hero that's not like an Arnold Schwarzenegger like ass kicking kind of like hero person. Like she's a real person. Yeah. And I think the stuff that she goes through in the movie is, I think, like traumatizing. And that, like all I have to say is like as a guy, this movie made me like be like, oh my god, like in the 90s.
Well, like it portrays it well.
Yeah, because she's in the FBI, right? So she gets treated differently because at that time, I'm sure all the FBI was full of douchebag dudes, right?
Like, could you imagine, Terrell? Like you're a businessman or whatever, and like you come into my office, I'm like, oh, didn't expect you to be so pretty. You'd be like, what the fuck, dude?
Fuck you, yeah.
So back to the asylum, they got all these extreme measures for Lecter. So right now, again, character development done subtly, which is excellent. Like clearly he's this hyper capable patient. They're saying you can't say the wrong thing to him, you can't bring a pen into his office, which is great foreshadowing for later. And like Clarice is like a little bit shell-shocked about how extraneous these measures are. And I gotta give a shout out to Barney, the guy at the gate of the cell, who's just like looks at her and he's like, you'll do well. You'll do well.
Yeah. He's in his mind. He's like, you're not gonna like this.
Yeah. So we get a little bit of ominous music as she approaches Lecter's cell, and then we get introduced to him. And like Hopkins, man, he's just a phenom in this movie. Like I love everything about how he portrays this role. Like when he's smelling her through the glass and like knows the brand of skin cream she's wearing, just I mean, that in itself is foreshadowing too. There's a lot of that in this movie, but it's done so well that you don't really notice it as you're going.
Until you like watch the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things that stood out to me right away was when she's approaching Hannibal's cell, and you get that shot down the hallway, and just that chair, that folding chair, just sitting in front of Lecter's cell, and like it's just such an iconic shot in my mind. Like, I hadn't seen this movie in, like at least 15, probably 20 years.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that was just like, that shot is just burned into my memory.
Right.
Yeah, just yet another thing that's so well done in this movie. And it's just like, maybe it's because that at the end of that hallway you're finally meeting Lecter, like that's why it's the run up to that, the moment right before.
That first conversation is so creepy about how like he explains, what's going on, who Buffalo Bill is.
And the origin of his name and stuff, and it's like, you haven't even been consulted on this yet.
And he like calls her out about how ambitious she is. Like, you look like a rube, a well-scrubbed rube, one generation away from poor white trash, which it once again, it builds both their characters at the same time. And like,
yes.
I didn't realize at the time like how iconic this scene was. Like, I think in filmmaking in general, this is one of like the best like villain versus hero scenes. And I don't know if you guys know this. The American Institute of Film says that this character is the best villain of all time. And I think what I love about Hannibal, and I hate to say this, as the movie progresses, there's times where you kind of like Hannibal.
He's an anti-hero in a way, but also
he has those sympathetic qualities about him at certain points. Yeah,
but that's the poison of Hannibal Lecter, right? Like it actually takes effect in us as viewers, which is why this movie is so friggin' good. We get the classic creepy line where he's like, a census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. And then the teeth sucking scene.
When I was a kid, I used to do that. My mom was always like, Phil, stop doing that. And like, maybe I should have just been like, hey, Mom, maybe you shouldn't have fucking let me watch this movie. I'm like 6, bro, Like...
Yeah, this movie, it goes, like, the thing is, like, this movie, like, it builds and builds upon all these, like, what I would describe as like traumatically like chaotic things. Like, not only does he say that, but then immediately after this, we get treated to the character of Miggs. Well, I'm not even going to mention what he does, because
let's just say he assaults her with some bodily fluids,
ejaculate,
and like when I saw that, because like I thought this movie was like I always remember it being like a scary movie, but it's kind of like a crime movie mixed with like a thriller, and that part to me was like, how did that even get approved by like anyone in the movie? Because like as soon as that happens, like it goes into this scene about she goes into like her childhood and stuff, and it's just like, it's really like messed up. I felt like that whole sequence of events, because it goes into like how her dad is there and stuff.
So that's in a later conversation with Lecter. But what I like about this Miggs scene here is right after that, so it sparks a bit of a riot, but it also triggers like an element of humanity in Hannibal that like until now you haven't seen. Like, it's the first bit of that you see, because he calls her back and he gives her a clue to look into this old patient of his. Had Miggs not done that, like, Hannibal would have been content to let her walk off, and we wouldn't have had the movie progressing, for one, but also just like it was an example of how he is, like, I don't know, he's got these weirdly redeeming qualities, which is awful to think of. But
I think he also saw Clarice as like a worthy opponent to like spar with and to like play with. And so like when that happened to her, he kind of felt like, oh, my opponent now has been like, I might as well help her out. You know what I mean? And it's crazy. Yeah.
So and like I think too, like it's just like, I think it was just like reinvigorating for him too, right? Because like it was something to excite his senses, and I think that is kind of what inspires him to make an attempt to escape and stuff, as we'll get to later in the movie. So that's the way I kind of view it. It's just just kind of shoot some new life into him.
I agree. Well, and he did a number on her, because like between that and like the next, we get a flashback right after this where her dad's a cop, and like we find out that that's part of her motivational forces, which Lecter may or may not exploit later on, but we'll get there. But after, what you see is her in the parking lot just like break down after the combination of the Lecter visit and the flashback, and you wonder, just, man, like, this guy has some kind of like psychiatric wizardry that he's able to employ at his will. So she follows the clue to an old storage locker, which is super creepy, by the way. She gets in, there's like these mannequins, this old piano, and in the back is a head in a jar. And so now we got to figure out what's up with this head in the jar. So then we get Clarice going back to Lecter's cell, and she's demanding answers about the head in the jar. We find out that it's Raspail. And Lecter's kind of like being a bit kind of curt with her, like being a bit mean. And then she's like, oh, that's something Miggs would say. And he's like, not anymore. And it's just like, oh man, this guy. But then he tries to extort her, and he wants her to get him transferred away from Chilton. And he will provide her help if she gets him transferred. And this was one of my stoner brain moments. That's why I wanted to touch on it, because like I just thought about like the overall premise of, is it worth helping one killer in the hopes of finding another? Like it's like tit for tat kind of, and that ends up being kind of an ongoing story in the movie. The more
it turns out in the end, Brett, it's not worth it.
No. Well, a discussion could be had there, so let's put a pin in that, because I want to talk about that when we get to the end.
Yeah,
because there is something to that for sure. Anyways, then we get the scene of the girl singing in the car, and it sets up kind of the next stage of things with Buffalo Bill, which is a huge main plot point. But
let's just take a moment to appreciate this. Just before this,
right,
we get to hear Tom Petty sing "American Girl" as
Hell's yeah
to this scene. I just want to point that out, because that's a great song, and I remember when it came on, I was just like, okay, this put me in a. It kind of like, I went from like a being like, this movie is scary and depressing, to like, American Girl.
Well, it was a much needed moment of levity right before a girl gets abducted by a serial killer.
Yeah, and it wasn't just about like the good vibes of Tom Petty. Where my mind went, and this again, very high. I was like, man, that girl sounds like me at the beginning of every episode of this show. Just slightly off key, slightly off time, but doing her damnedest. So God bless her. But then, she gets abducted by Buffalo Bill, and we don't know it yet, but we're going to find out a little bit later that she's actually the daughter of a prominent senator, and that kind of puts the stakes in the movie.
Yeah.
But
one little interesting detail about the part where she does get abducted is Buffalo Bill is trying to move this couch, or pretending he's trying to move this couch, and faking that he has a broken arm, which is actually a tactic that Ted Bundy used in real life. And that the author of the book Silence of the Lambs, Thomas Harris, I guess he was a journalist before he got into being an author.
Right.
And he had interviewed quite a few serial killers through his career as a journalist, and so that's kind of what gave him such a good insight into the mind of a psychopath, right? And just that little detail about faking the broken arm, like as soon as you see that, and someone as morbidly curious as I am, I just saw that, I was like, wow, that's a really cool detail.
Yeah, for sure. Great fact. So then we get a little bit of discourse with Crawford and Clarice. He needs her to come with him to Virginia to investigate a skinning down there. And basically on the trip down, she calls him on his bullshit and like says, you don't want a psychological profile of Lecter. You want Lecter to give us information on this killer. Like you're obsessed with this guy, and just basically calls her on her shit. And I don't know if it plays into it or not, but we see kind of him sort of begin to ostracize her a bit when they first get to the coroner's office, because he just kind of takes the police chief and like goes off, and like they do man stuff, I guess. They got to discuss the case or whatever, and he leaves her out there, and there's this awkward waiting around while he talks to the police chief. And what I love is, like, we've been talking about it a little bit, but it's a good expose on like the inequality of 1991, right? Like you got all these male cops standing around just kind of ogling, and Clarice is just like, what do I do here? And she ends up having this flashback to her dad's funeral, and you don't know whether that's triggered by the situation or whether it just happened to happen. Who knows? But I really like this too, because it's like a tried and true backstory technique to give a little bit more information about what she's about. But in this film, it didn't come across as, forced or hokey like you might see with some flashback scenes. Anyways, so finally,
I was honestly so baked when I watched it. I didn't realize that was a flashback, and I was like, "That was kind of a weird scene." I don't remember that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. This is the rabbit hole I was down when I was all baked and watching this. But finally, they analyze the body. They notice it's been skinned a little bit differently than the rest of the victims that they found so far. And then they find this cocoon in her throat, and it'll end up being a moth larvae, as we'll find out next, because they head down to a museum, get a couple of nerds who have a pre-existing relationship with Clarice. They never expand on that, but you could tell the dude with the crossed eyes is like has a little thing for her.
Well, he like hits on her, and like she kind of gives him a look like being like, "You guys too?" Like she's like she can't like, you know what I mean? Like that's one of the things I noticed in my notes. Like that's one of the reasons why I love Clarice, because like you kind of put yourself into her shoes, and like you forget as like a guy that like some women, like especially in this time, were like constantly having to put up with guys just being like just walking horny dudes. So you know what I mean?
Well,
and
yeah.
like I love that scene because she just kind of like stares at him and like, bro, like, can you just lay off? Like, I'm trying to do my job. You know?
Well, and initially when she gets there and they're chatting it up, like you can tell she's happy. She's got a smile on her face. Like this is a comfort zone for her. She doesn't think these nerds are going to, and that's why, yeah, like you said, she's just like, really, dude? Like,
yeah.
Like, give me a break. I just got ostracized with the other top dudes, and then I got jizz thrown in my face a couple days ago. Like, leave me alone. Like,
so the nerds figure out it's a death's head moth, and that ends up playing a pretty significant part later. And then we cut to like this news scene, and where we actually find out officially in the movie that the girl that Bill abducted in the car is a senator's daughter. And in classic like storytelling fashion, now that we have a clock, because he usually kills his victims within 3 days, so the stakes are raised. We have a clock. That's like the key to suspense in a storytelling fashion. So now we have
it's a MacGuffin. It's a classic MacGuffin.
So now we have that, and we're ready to rock. So they, under the new pressure that they have, they give Clarice the authority to offer Lecter a deal. Although from their perspective, it's a fake deal. But basically, if he helps profile Buffalo Bill and the girl ends up saved, he gets to get transferred to a prison and
go swimming for an hour a day. It's like, sorry, this isn't Canada, buddy.
Yeah. So I found this scene to be amazingly done, because she needs Lecter, like, almost, like, no, I would say worse than he needs her, right? Like, he could chill out in his cell indefinitely, but now she needs him, and she's kind of desperate, right?
He knows this. That's why he does what I call this the quid pro quo scene.
Yes.
Which is where like he gives her something, and then he's like, tell me about your childhood.
Yeah.
And then he'll tell a little bit about like Billy and the significance of the moth and all this stuff. But he kind of like turns like one of the things I find unsettling about Hannibal is that he'll like randomly throw in like just really like out of what I feel like not like his normal smart like psychiatric kind of way. Like he'll like randomly say stuff like, did he rape you or sodomize you? Like, tell me about it. And you're just like, whoa, dude, like,
like, well, because he's like this intellectual, right? And you're like, you start to like him a little bit, and then he'll say something horrible like that, and you're like, oh yeah, you know what, Hannibal Lecter, you're kind of a jerk. And for that, Hannibal Lecter, I think you're a real jerk, and you win Phil Froze's Jerk of the Week.
Phil Froze, Jerk of the Week.
You gotta stop eating people, buddy. You gotta stop doing it.
But yeah, the cat and mouse psychological stuff here was about all my stoned brain could handle at the moment, but I loved it. But yeah, he gives a little bit of a psych evaluation, and then after that whole scene, we get a scene at Buffalo Bill's, and this is the classic scene that everybody remembers and has been used a million times in other pop culture with the lotion in the basket, and like we just see that like. It's very disturbing, actually. Like, I know they've made jokes of it in movies. They put it in comedy movies as, like, this, like, little ha-ha throwback reference. But that part was not funny. Like...
Well, you could see, like, the fingernails and stuff, like, trapped in that. What I found really creepy about the scene is, like, how it led up to it. Because, you know, Hannibal talks about how Buffalo Bill was, like, formed through systematic abuse because he wanted, like, gender reassignment surgery and stuff like that,
and he was turned down.
And then it goes from like this like really like sensitive like tough kind of conversation to him being like, it rubs the lotion, and like, which I feel like is like it's meant to be like funny, I guess, but it's really not. It's like disturbing to me.
Well,
like,
I just found his whole cadence and the way he talked and everything to be disturbing right from the outset. Like I don't know. You know what he's like? Put the lotion in the basket. Like it's just, like
what really got me about that scene was just the victim, like the woman who's kidnapped, like her screaming and stuff, like you know, and I think you know, quite a few people can relate to this. You know, there's so much like, you know, like what South Park dubbed like murder porn. You know, like people just have that morbid curiosity and they want to learn about these serial killers, and you know, I'm guilty of it myself. And you kind of lose the human aspect to it. And this, through showing that and making it so horrifying and like just putting a human face to it, it kind of made me think about, you know, what I've been consuming or how I've been, you know, like poring over all this information on serial killers and stuff while kind of forgetting that human element to it.
Yeah, for sure. So after this scene, we get back to Lecter's cell, and he's being transferred to Memphis. And Chilton's about to lose his prize research patient, in his own words. But unfortunately, Chilton, the idiot, also loses his pen in the process. And anybody who's been paying attention can already have a pretty good idea where this is going to be headed. And so then, yes, we get to Memphis, and we get the crazy mask scene, which he's remembered for. It's right behind Phil there. So if you're watching on YouTube, that's the one we mean. And he's in a straitjacket and stuff while they transfer him. And what's weird here is Chilton notices he doesn't have his pen anymore. But he doesn't, like, pick up on why or what. Like, you were the guy who grilled Clarice about not bringing a pen in. Like, what a guy. Anyways.
I think all bets are out the window. They're already moving Hannibal the Cannibal and introducing him to a nice senator.
Right.
And I actually I love this scene because of Hopkins' like intensity in it. Like, you know what's crazy about this? I don't know if you guys know this. Hopkins is only in this movie for 16 minutes, but every scene that he's in is just like so intense. Like when he talks to the senator, it's so intense and he's so creepy. And he says like really uncomfortable shit.
Yes.
Like about like how did she breastfed her kid and all this stuff.
For sure.
And it's just so like he's so amazing. You just have to give your hat off to Hopkins in this movie.
Well, he won an Academy Award for Best Leading Actor for this movie, and like you said, he's in it for 16 minutes.
Yeah.
Like it's just, and again, like it made the guy's career. Like he's Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah. I have this starred in my notes too. This exact same part about Lecter's character. So clearly, it caught us all in the same kind of wavelength. He ends up giving him the name of Buffalo Bill, or supposed name. He says Louis Friend, which actually isn't his name at all. We'll find that out later. But it's actually an anagram, which we also find out later. But then Clarice in the new cell, his kind of makeshift cell in the Memphis prison or whatever, she confronts him about the false information. She has like the case file and stuff, and he starts to profile her even more. And this is where we get the kind of stuff about the screaming of the lambs and you know what?
Yeah, it's the silence of the lambs conversation, I call it.
Right?
Basically.
Yeah. Exactly. So we find out that that's kind of a trigger for her, but also what drives her, because in her mind, if she solves this case, that's going to be the redemption, and the screaming of the lambs will stop.
Will that make the lambs stop screaming, Clarice?
Yeah. Well, and so right at the end of this, she's kind of mad. She's taken off. He says everything she needs, she has in the case file, and he's basically done with Clarice. He's like, I'm not helping you anymore. You got everything you need. I'm done with it. And what's funny is the classic line people quote about Lecter is, hello, Clarice. But for me, the real creepy one is the opposite. It's at the end of this scene where he says, goodbye, Clarice. And just like, that's the one that gets me. But then she forgets her case file. And he's like, oh, your case file. She comes back. He rubs her finger in this super creepy way. Like with his finger.
That's one thing I noted being like, of course, Hannibal had to do something creepy as soon as he could touch her, right?
Yeah.
Like,
so cool fact about this scene here, that we're going two-timer club now. George A. Romero makes a cameo in this movie as one of the FBI agents that's pulling her away in this scene. So that's the director of Day of the Dead and Dawn of the Dead. And
he's joining the double
father of zombie films. Yeah, so
crazy.
An interesting little tidbit I never would have noticed in a million years. So thanks, YouTube, for that one.
Yeah, sweet. Man, that's awesome. So after she leaves, we get the crazy escape scene. And
Which I love. This is like the climax of the movie, right?
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot there, so I just want to say again, if your first interpretation of this movie is us spoiling it for you, please shut us off for a second and go watch the friggin' movie, because this scene is, it's one of the best parts of the film.
Well, you know what I found with this scene? You know in the movie The Dark Knight where the Joker pretends to, like, he gets caught on purpose?
Yeah.
I think a lot of movies are inspired by this movie in general, and I think that scene was inspired by it, but I think, like, this whole scene is so influential, like, the way that he tricked the cops, and the way that he, like, murdered everyone, and, like, how it kind of set you up for, like, the 90s, for, like, movies like Seven and stuff like that came out later that really try to capture the same kind of, like, thrill that you get in this scene.
Well,
yeah, absolutely.
This is something you'd only get if you were a repeat viewer and you knew what had happened in the scene. But because I was high and I was watching, I noticed that when they come in and Hannibal's escaped, and they come in and they're checking on the cops, and they get to Pembry, who's like, Pembry, and what I love is the guy that's like by him, like consoling him. He's like, "You're looking real good there."
Yeah, that's what I was gonna do. He kept on saying it. It's like, homeboy just presumably had his face gnawed off. Like,
No, that
was
I believe that was Hannibal wearing a Pembry face.
Oh, that's what I mean. But it's like the guy's face is obviously pretty effed up at this point. And it's like, you're looking good. You're looking good. Like, he looks so good that you can't recognize.
And that it wasn't even him.
Imagine being Hannibal being like, "Yeah, I look really good."
How did he not laugh?
You're looking like dinner good.
Yeah.
But
good thing I brought my salt shaker.
Yeah. It's funny because we find out in a few minutes that it's Lecter wearing Pembry's face, and he stands up in the ambulance and ends up making his escape. But then we get the shot back to Buffalo Bill's, and this is where he's sewing, and we kind of find out about the skin suit that he's been making of his victims. And one note I made here was the depth of the movie and the depth of my stoner brain here. Lecter's escape scene that was so amazing prior actually just proves to be foreshadowing again. Because until now, the cops have thought that the skinning was about having a trophy of some kind, right? But now we see it's in fact a suit he's making. And who just escaped prison using a human suit but Hannibal frickin' Lecter? So it's just... Man.
Oh shit, Bretsky was drawing all these parallels that I never noticed. Good job, man.
But that's a sign of a good movie. Like, when you watch a movie like Donnie Darko, you'll find new things in it over and over again. You watch Silence of the Lambs, you find new things when you watch it.
Right.
And I think that's a clear sign that this is like what makes it such a strong movie, because little details like that you don't really think about until you watch it a couple times over. And I love, the only thing I can say about this movie that kind of was a little weak was just like the next scene where Clarice is like arguing with her FBI buddy, and then she just like magically finds a hunch to go to Ohio to like find
I do agree overall that, like, by comparison it was there, but I felt like the motivation was still there. She was pissed because she got
very detective-y.
She got taken off the lead aspect of the case. Like, she was no longer in charge of handling it, and she didn't have Hannibal to profile, so she didn't really have her kind of skin in the game like she had, no pun intended, that she had prior. But she still had the motivation because they instructed her to go question, like, the girl with the diamond strips, like her friends and family and stuff, and kind of get some background, because she had kind of figured out that, like, he must have known her, right? Because that was the only reason having different colored skinning made sense, or the way she was killed made sense, or something like that. And I totally agree. By comparison to the rest of the movie, it's not like the most
That's like my one
cohesive.
big complaint, because like she kind of just was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go to the first victim," and that like leads her to basically finding Buffalo Bill.
Yeah, right. So after some searching, she ends up finding a name and a place of this like old woman who she's going to go investigate. So she calls Crawford, and she's like, "Yo, I got this lead on this guy," and he's like, "We already know where he is. We're planning to raid and bust him." So Clarice is going to follow up on her own lead alone, and I love how that ties into the next part. But before we can even get to that, we got the senator's daughter trying to escape by like luring the dog into the well with a chicken bone back at Buffalo Bill's. And while this is happening, we get the kind of the pinnacle of Bill's sort of demented experience that he's having there. He's dancing to this weird and shout out to the song "Goodbye Horses." I don't think they could have picked a more appropriately awful song for this part. But yeah, he's got the skin suit on and a bunch of makeup, and there's just like a bunch of explicit and creepy lines. It's one of the creepiest scenes in the whole movie. But like, you get to be like, "Would you fuck me? I'd fuck me." Just like stuff like that. Just like, oh.
I don't think he has the skin suit on in that scene.
Yeah,
though.
he is. Yeah, he's wearing the skin suit. It's not finished yet.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I know.
It starts off with him like putting on his makeup, and he's wearing like you can see the skin.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I'm always thinking about the scene where he tucks the old twig and dingleberries in, and
he does do that. That probably is the
scene.
part that distracts from the fact that he's wearing a suit too. Yeah.
Yeah, he's wearing a skin suit during that, Phil. Unfortunately.
So
I always just saw like he was wearing some flowy shit.
Phil just like it just looked like a nice dress to me. Looked like a normal Sunday dress.
Just another Tuesday,
So, but then in the midst of his like little fiasco, he hears the dog barking, so he goes to investigate, and then he has a meltdown about Precious being in the well, and you can see like he's a very meticulous and diabolical serial killer, but you can see he's also a very simple dude here because the dog being in the well almost breaks him mentally, and then a doorbell rings, and it's just
you don't hurt my dog. Come on now.
Yeah, and a doorbell rings, and now like he's got this whirlwind of emotions going on and can barely handle it. And here's where I really love the suspenseful work in the film here, because it's shot in such a way that it seems like the FBI is going to his place, right? They're approaching the house. They're ringing the doorbell at the same time that he's hearing a doorbell. But then when Bill finally opens the door, it's actually the house that Clarice followed up on in her lead. Yeah. And it's just
what though, Brett, I have to say that's filming, and we're talking about this movie being so inspirational.
Yeah.
That the
red herring.
Like the red herring, yeah, like making it seem like they're breaking into the house and they're somewhere else entirely. Yeah. I realized when I watched it, I'm like, that's where that comes from. And in so many, it's used as a shitty plot device in so many movies now.
Yes.
When it's completely pointless.
We see it in The Departed at the end there, where like you think it's like one thing happening, but it's another thing happening.
Yeah,
it's kind of similar, kind of like trick. But
yeah,
I love
which you should go back and watch that episode. By the way, find us. We break down this part. It's really good.
When they do that though in this movie, like it actually does work and it makes sense. But I've just seen that done like completely pointlessly, like just so you can pad out like another 20 minutes of time on it essentially. So it was interesting to see that in retrospect.
Yes. And so she comes into Bill's house under the guise of like asking some questions and stuff, and he's trying to play it cool and buy some time by finding like a business card for the old lady she's following up on. And it's a suspenseful scene because we know what's going on, but clearly she doesn't, obviously. And we don't know what's going to happen. And I found the whole house scene just weird and unsettling. And even knowing what was going to happen and how the scene was going to break down, like even that initial thing of her just standing there, it was just awkward and unsettling for me. And like the moths flying around were just like creepy as hell too.
It's one of those houses, you say you went to someone's house and it looked like that. Like, you ever been to someone's house where it's so dirty and nasty you can't like really sit down anywhere?
Yeah.
That's one of those houses.
At the same time though, I'm looking at the exterior of the house, and I'm like, you know what? That house has some solid bones. It's got good bones, that house. And how the fuck cheap were houses back in the day that Buffalo Bill can have a bigger fucking house than I do? You know what I mean, Brett? You've been in the housing market recently. Like, how does Buffalo Bill have that house? Seriously.
His basement is it's a big dungeon. So
that's a big basement. You can have several man caves down.
It's not out of the realm of possibility.
And another cave if you're Buffalo Bill, whatever. But
it's not out of the realm of possibility that he killed the old lady and took her house. Like, they never say that, but we don't know that he didn't do that. Maybe he needed like an old chunk of skin for his suit. Like, it could be the ass of his suit or something.
All I'm saying is, in the early 90s, fucking anybody could buy a house.
Yes, yes. But yeah, the death's head moths flying around are what eventually tips off Clarice, and we get some climax. She like pulls out her gun, and Bill starts to run. So she's like chasing him through the house, and she notices the girl in the well. She hears the screaming, but she's also like kind of in a dilemma because she's got to track down and get Bill. And then this next scene is so epic, like
the lights off scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he kills the lights and he's got night vision goggles on, like it's just such a great idea for a scene.
Oh yeah, like it just plays on like your base, like primal instincts.
Well,
like
he
just
almost,
to
like,
be smothered
he
in,
almost-
in blackness like that is just.
He almost reaches out to her and like touches her. And what's crazy about the scene, a lot of times in other movies, what I liked about this scene is there'll be like some violin stabs or like creaky noises, like or like whatever kind of music.
Yes.
All you hear in this is Clarice like
Breathing.
panting and running around, and that's what makes it so creepy. Because like, yeah, if I was in little Mr. Buffalo Bill's little shop of horrors in the basement there, I'd be running the hell out of there and looking for backup. I wouldn't be playing around and trying to catch him personally.
Yeah. That is some spooky business down there.
Yeah, well, and like just going back to the silence there, and all you hear is like Clarice breathing. Like, if it wasn't for that, like it's because of the silence that she hears him cock the hammer on the gun.
Yeah.
And that's when she's like, "Oh, there he is! Bang, bang, bang!" And she shoots him dead.
Yeah, if he would have had an automatic, shouldn't have went with the revolver, Buffalo Bill. Come on now, what is this? Red Dead Redemption 2?
1991. But yeah, she ends up saving the day, and we see the senator's daughter leaving the house with the dog. So I guess she's keeping the dog. Like nothing like a reminder of the last 3 days of torture for the next 5 years or however long the dog's gonna live.
Yeah, let me keep this little souvenir from the most traumatic experience pretty much anybody can go through. Oh, but he's so cute and fluffy. You know?
It's precious, literally.
By the way, I've babysat a dog like that. Dog sat a dog like that, and those things are fucking annoying.
So obviously Clarice's work in solving the case and getting Buffalo Bill gets her full FBI status. There's a little party afterwards. She has the handshake with Crawford, and it's, to me, this was like the conclusion of that strong female lead story arc, because Crawford finally, like, we see initially, and Hannibal touches on this in earlier conversation, that like Crawford is like interested in her, like maybe wants, you know, has ulterior motives or something. And this was kind of like the handshake between equals for them, and him finally acknowledging that
great job here.
Yeah,
great ass.
Oh no, oh no.
No, that's not what happened.
But for me, that equality, like as a viewer, wasn't necessary because she was already a badass, like to the viewers. But it was just nice to see the character of Crawford acknowledge that after the history. And then she's got a phone call, and it's Mr. Hannibal Lecter calling her back, congratulating her, saying, "I won't be calling on you, and I hope you do the same." Basically saying like, you never have to worry about me, but just leave me the hell alone and let me eat people, and we'll be perfectly fine.
Not gonna eat you. I won't eat you.
But he tells her he's having an old friend for dinner, and we get a little shot of the psychiatrist,
Chilton.
Dr. Chilton, and she's horrified, just like keeps saying Dr. Lecter over and over, and the movie just kind of ends.
Yeah,
and
it kind of lets you say there's totes gonna be a sequel, but there was.
There are. There's a bunch of movies in this. It's like what is there? There's four movies.
There's
think
four.
in total?
There's four.
5.
So there was a
I think there's 5 books. There technically are 5, but the first one isn't really canon. It was Manhunter, which was actually made before Silence of the Lambs,
which got made again afterwards as Red Dragon,
which is the first book,
which is the prequel to Silence of the Lambs. And then there's Hannibal, and then I think a few years later they had Hannibal Rising, or was it Hannibal Rising? So there has been a few movies in the series. And
I'll be damned, I haven't even watched any of these. So.
I'm halfway through Red Dragon right now, and it's good, but Anthony Hopkins really plays up the Hannibal role. Like it's a little over the top.
Well, and I think.
Spice melange that
I think that's the same case for Hannibal, the movie Hannibal. I think it's played up a little bit. Like it's Silence of the Lambs is the definitive movie of the series and will always be seen as such. And I remember Roger Ebert, it was either him or Siskel, one of the two. Anyways, they put it on blast when they came out with Hannibal, because they're like, why would you ever make a sequel to a near perfect movie? Like, let the sequels and the franchise exist in the literary world, and leave the cinematic masterpiece that this film is in its own island, because it stands head and shoulders above all the rest of the movies, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, boys, it's that time of the episode where we rank our movie, and either of you guys want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. I'll give it a 9 out of 10. It was, again, I hadn't seen this movie. I think it was honestly since I was a kid, and it was nice to be pleasantly surprised again. It reminds me of when we watched Shawshank Redemption.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't seen it in so long, and I watched it, and I was like, wow, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. So yeah, definite 9 out of 10. Might even give it higher, but I'm just not feeling like it today, I guess. But great film. It left me with one question though, and that's like, Mom, why the fuck would you let 6-year-old Phil watch this movie?
I have the same question, Phil. I have the same question.
Phil's mom. Why? Phil's mom. Why? Terrell?
You know what? I love this movie. I think Silence of the Lambs is like a rare example of a film that really transcends the genre. It has a cult following for a good reason. It's had mainstream success, and like, why is that? It's because Hannibal is the boogeyman that we love to hate, and we hate ourselves for enjoying him on screen. And I think even with 15 minutes or 60 minutes, he totally gets in your head in this movie. And Foster is incredible, and I think this movie came out like decades before, the other kind of true crime tales that we all liked on like Netflix and stuff.
True Detective and stuff. Yeah.
And this seemed to be infinitely more scary than anything that existed at the time. And I think it showed us that evil could be kind of like this like deviant, seductive thing, and
which is scarier to me.
Yeah, I think what I find the most scary about this film is that because of the way it's shot, because of the characters introduced into it, it feels like really like it could happen in real life.
Yes.
Which is what makes it scary to me. And yeah, I'm going to give it a 9.3. I'm going to have to watch it again. I love this movie, and I want to see it again.
Yeah, I agree. It was so good, and it's rare to find a movie where there's a third wheel character. Like, and don't get me wrong, like, Hopkins is a lead character in the movie, but he's not the main bad guy despite being a bad guy. And I just think the dynamic there, where he fluctuates in and out between, is he good, is he bad, is he good, like, between the redeeming qualities. Like, to me, that psychology is emblematic of Hannibal Lecter as a character, and the fact that that's able to come through the screen and actually make me fluctuate in how I feel about him as a character, just, man, I don't even have words for how spectacular that is. So, I think I gave the song a 4.9, so I'm just going to flip it on its head, give it a 9.4 out of 10, because this movie is just outstanding, man. It's
a masterpiece.
I can't praise it any higher than I am. Like, it's so good. But yeah, that about does it for the movie section.
Yeah, another feel-good film for the podcast, and a nice little lullaby for the song as well. So just a chilled out episode all around.
Yeah.
Boys. I'm pretty happy.
I was thinking about that beforehand. I was like, this is like the most like just like kind of like difficult to chew kind of episode.
Yeah. This was our heaviest podcast.
Yeah.
Because Meshuggah is heavy metal.
Yes.
And Silence of the Lambs is heavy in its themes.
So next week, I don't know what you guys were trying to do when we planned out our schedule, but it feels like you were trying to make a rascal out of me at the end of March. Next week,
very possible.
Next week,
probably did, yeah.
Our song is "WAP" by Cardi B.
Oh.
And I don't know how I ever agreed to it. I probably just felt that.
That was my idea. I wanted to do something that was like modern and like that the cool kids were listening to,
No, I don't think anyone's listening to that song anymore. Maybe we can change it. Who knows?
Yeah, and I don't think anyone who did listen to it...
We're doing it.
I don't think anyone who did listen to it was really like cool? Like the people who loved it?
I don't know, man.
I think we're just old.
Yeah, do your research on it. It's one of those songs, believe it or not.
Yeah.
A lot of women talking about women empowerment because of Clarice and stuff. A lot of women find this song very like empowering and like they think it represents.
Yeah. Either way, fuck my life for having to listen to this song. What's the movie?
Well, at least the movie is going to be some redemption because we're getting our boy Nick Cage back in the saddle alongside John Travolta. Face Off is our movie for next week.
We did Wet Ass Pussy and Face Off.
I like that we did Silence of the Lambs
and then Face Off.
There we go.
Yes, Face On, Face Off, right?
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's pretty solid. I'm gonna need some good old John Travolta, John Travolta and Nick Cage. Fuck yeah,
it's actually a good movie. I love that.
Yeah. I'm gonna need that movie.
As part of.
I'm gonna need that movie to cleanse the palate after trying to be professional and do a proper analysis of a song. Yeah.
We watched Face Off as part of our Cage Rage event that we had when we just had our daughter. So yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun to revisit it. I'm sure my wife will complain, but hey,
when doesn't she? Right? Yeah. I said it. You didn't. You can't get in trouble for that.
Phil, she'll be really happy to listen to WAP though.
Oh yeah, I'm sure she will.
Yeah. I'm sure she will. So yeah. That's next week's episode. It'll be coming to you via YouTube, via Spotify. You can check us out on all of our socials at the Stoners POV, Instagram and Twitter. We try to provide some entertaining content, some memes that tie in and relate to the media that we're breaking down that week. So yeah, get at us, follow us, like and subscribe, smash that like button, and just chat with us, man. We're here. You know, we're here. We're old. It's a pandemic. We're cool.
Yeah.
Just come hang out. Anyways,
and don't you forget to ring that fucking bell to get notification. No, I'm just kidding. I don't give a shit if you do or not. But thanks for listening.
Yeah, and thanks for watching. So, with that said, we are going to bid you adieu. My name is Brett. This is Terrell. That's Phil. This has been the Stoner's Point of View. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye, Clarice.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.